So, Bette, I am thrilled that you're here on my show, mainly because you saved my career once, and I'm looking forward to again. Actually, and then we'll start talking about it. When I went to Disney in '84, the first person to call me was an agent saying, "You've been trying to be in business with Bette Midler for 20 years. How would you like to do Down and Out in Beverly Hills?" I came to Disney. It was the first movie that Disney made under Touchstone in the new era. First R-rated movie that Disney had ever made, with an actress who had been involved in many projects, some of which were controversial. And that, and 5 movies later, kind of turned the momentum of a dormant Disney around. So I wanted to talk about that and all the rest of it. But going to Disney for you, after having done, you know, Clams in the Half Shell and working in New York, and was that a strange move?
I was terrified, and I couldn't understand what they would see, why they wanted me. I'm thinking, because I had grown up with, you know, Bambi and Cinderella, and I was terrified. I was so...
You was Cinderella.
Well, thank you very much. I was stunned that they would want me, and I couldn't figure out what was going on over at the studio. That they would suddenly make this big turn from family. You,
please.
Excuse me. Well, they meaning them.
I read a script, and actually, it was the first Desperate Housewife we'd ever read, and you playing a Beverly Hills quasi-desperate housewife with Mick Nolte, directed by Paul Mazursky, sounded fantastic.
Well, it came at just the right time for me, because I had had big success with The Rose, and I never got another job. I never got another phone call. The studio eventually called me back and said, well, we'll make a, we'll do, this was during the time of Jinxed. My second picture, I lost my manager, excuse me, I excused my manager. I left my manager, the famous Aaron Russo, who was a real, I have to say, a real light in my life. He was a very exciting person to be in business with.
He recently ran for governor of Nevada.
Yes, he's a fearless kind of guy.
Got a documentary about to come out about how you don't have to pay your taxes.
That sounds right.
I've seen it.
I was in a lot of very exciting police chases with him.
Do you know
those were great days.
You know, he said he was going to kill me?
I heard rumblings of that. What's
to go
that
back
story?
about 30 years or 20 years, when I was in New York at ABC, a man comes into my office and says, there's a woman singing in the bathhouses in New York who ABC has to make a deal with. He said, will you have a meeting? I said, great. What I didn't know was the manager of this up-and-coming actress, Bette Midler, and I shouldn't be talking here, but now you're interviewing me, but whatever. So I had an apartment for rent in a building I owned. And Aaron Russo came and saw it, and I rented it to him. And that night, I lay in bed with my wife, because I asked him as he left what he did for a living, and he said he managed rock groups. And my wife and I discussed it, and we decided it was a mistake. And I called him the next day, and I said to him, Mr. Russo, I've decided against it. I can't do it. He said, please, I beg you, let me come back again. He had this beautiful little blonde wife who was so sweet, and they came back, and they loved the wood-burning fireplace, and I rented it to him again. That night I went back to bed with my wife. We discussed that he had rock groups. We said it was a mistake. I called him the next day and said, I'm sorry, I can't do it. And he said, obviously kidding, I'm going to kill you. So now it's 2 years later. We have a meeting about Bette Midler, this actress in the Baz, and halfway through the meeting he points to me and he says, you're the one. And I said, yes, I am. And he got up and walked away, and everybody else in the room said, what was that all about? And then I could never make a deal with you.
I never worked for you. Never.
No, I couldn't get the Rose?
No.
Tell me about the bathhouses.
Let me explain to you. I was a starving actress. I wasn't exactly starving. I had a job in Fiddler on the Roof. I started actually off Broadway with Tom Ian. I was his house person. He came to me with all his scripts. I was his leading lady for a couple of years. And because I had been with Tom Ian all those years, I was very used to, I was very used to gay people. I thought I loved them. I had no problem with them. So I was in Fiddler, and I could not get another job. I would go on all these auditions. Could not get another job. Too short, too fat, too tall, too small, too white, too blonde, too whatever it was. I was always wrong. And so when this this gentleman called me. He had been my teacher at the Berghoff studio. And he said, there's a man who called me. He's looking for an act. I said, well, I have a little bit of an act. I have like 20 minutes. He said, well, it's in a gay bathhouse. Do you have any problem with that? I said, I have no idea what a gay bathhouse is. Oh, no, I have no problem. After he told me what it paid, which was $300, I mean, I was like,
what?
$300 for the weekend. I was so excited. I mean, it's $300. That was a lot of money in those days. Because I was working for Fiddler for $225 a week, 8 shows. So this was $300 for 2 shows. I mean, I thought it struck it rich. I didn't even think about gay bathhouses. I said, let me at him. So I went, and I went with my best friend, who was a hairdresser, who was a gay guy, who was Mr. Gerard, and he was a fabulously, famously funny man. And when I told him that I was going to do this, he said, let me write you some lines. So I said, write me some lines. And when we opened, I had some lines to talk about the bathhouse. They were so stunned that I knew what was going on. They were so thrilled that anybody knew their culture that I suddenly was like their pet. And I didn't work there that long, but I made such an impression on the world at large because I was singing in a gay bathhouse that, I mean, I always say that when I die, it's going to say on my tombstone, began career at Continental Baths. You know, that's the start of my obituary.
Johnny Carson found you there.
He did.
David Frost.
Yes. Oh, yes. I started doing all those shows. I did Merv Griffin, Steve Allen, David Frost, Mike Douglas. You had to go to Philly. Never been to Philly. I mean, I was on my way, and I was terribly, terribly excited. And really, they were the ones who sent me on my way.
But you moved from Hawaii.
Yeah.
To New York.
At 19.
By yourself?
By myself, basically by myself. I landed in San Francisco with a good friend of mine, and we started a road trip. And by the time we got to New Orleans, I'd had enough. And so I took a plane from New Orleans to New York, and my relatives from New Jersey met me. I stayed a week with them, and then I moved into the Broadway Central, which collapsed a year or 2 later.
The thing fell down?
It just fell down, as buildings in New York often do. And not with me in it, but I had by that time I had made some contacts. I had a little job at Stearns selling gloves, and I was basically, and you know, I was only 19, and my daughter's 19 now, and she says, I cannot believe, she's in college, I cannot believe that you came by yourself to New York City in 1965 and with nobody, and you began a career. And I say, I guess times were different.